Let's talk about emotional regulation. Because when you feel overwhelmed, it's easy to react based on pure emotion. But that can make stress and anxiety much harder to manage. If you want to control your emotions and deal with overwhelm more effectively, you don't need more willpower, you need a better process. And today I'm going to show you how to do that so you can regulate your emotions and calm your mind. So let's talk about how to manage your emotions. Hello, I'm Jeremy Godwin, and this is the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast, full of practical tools for better mental health. Today we're going to talk about how to control your emotions when you feel overwhelmed, and I'm going to show you what that actually means in real life. Because it's not about just forcing yourself to somehow stay calm, it's about steadying your system so you can respond with choice. In this episode, I'm going to help you understand what's actually happening when you feel emotionally overwhelmed, and I'll share practical tools you can use to calm your mind and cope better, even when you're running on empty. Because the hard part about overwhelm isn't just feeling like, things are a lot. It's that once your system tips into that heightened emotional state, the logical part of you is not driving the bus anymore. And that's why so many people end up either spiraling or snapping, maybe shutting down or doing something they regret, and then feeling bad about themselves afterwards on top of all of it. So if you've ever had that moment where you can quite literally feel your emotions rising up in your body, then you know what I'm talking about. And just to be clear, if that happens to you, you're not weak, you're not useless, you're not damaged, you're just overwhelmed. And your nervous system is doing exactly what it thinks it has to do to protect you. So, you just need to learn how to manage your nervous system differently. And that's what we're talking about today. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed at the moment, let me give you a quick and simple stabilizer that you can use in under a minute, and then we'll build on it later in the episode so you've got a really big, full process that you can come back to at any time when you feel overwhelmed. So the quick way is I want you to think of this as being your interrupt button for when you can feel the emotional wave rising. And it is pause, breathe, what, why. So let me quickly explain what that means and how to do it. So when your emotions start going off like a frog in a sock, take a moment to pause and notice what's happening. Think to yourself, okay, my emotions are taking over. Then take a slow breath in and a slow breath out and repeat that for 15 seconds, longer if you can. Now, breathing won't magically fix everything, but it will take the edge off the activation of your nervous system. Then label what you're feeling as simply as you can. I'm anxious, I'm angry, I'm panicky, I'm numb. Once you've done that, ask yourself why you feel that way. You're not looking for the full life story here, just understanding what the immediate trigger is. So maybe it's because I feel trapped, or because I'm scared that I'm going to mess this up, or I'm overstimulated, or I feel criticized, or I'm exhausted. Now, labeling the what and the why is essential, and here's why. You cannot regulate what you haven't named. Following this quick process will help calm your nervous system a little and engage rational thinking. And shortly, I'll talk you through how to take this process further. Because like I said, that's the first step, but it creates enough space for you to choose what you're going to do next instead of just reacting on autopilot. Now, before we get to that, we need to dig a bit deeper into this topic. So let's talk about what is emotional regulation. Okay, so let's discuss this stuff without turning it into therapy speak. Emotional regulation is the skill of noticing what you're feeling, understanding what's driving it, and then managing it in a way that helps you cope and respond with choice rather than just reacting based on pure emotion. So, to be very clear, it is not about being calm all the time, and it's definitely not about just pretending that you're fine. It's about being able to stabilize yourself enough to do something helpful and thoughtful, instead of just being dragged around by whatever emotion is louder in the moment. Now, that's why the word control can be a bit misleading here, right? A lot of people hear control your emotions and think that it means, great, stop feeling this right now. But emotions don't really work like that. They're information, they're signals, they're your brain and body trying to communicate something important to you, sometimes accurately, sometimes in a really exaggerated way because you're exhausted or stressed, but still, it's your mind and body trying to protect you. So, a much more accurate way of looking at the idea of controlling your emotions is this: can you influence how you respond to what you're feeling instead of just reacting to it? Can you slow yourself down, make sense of what's happening, and consciously choose what you do next instead of reacting on pure instinct, even if the feeling is still there? When you can regulate your emotions, you might still feel anxious or angry, ashamed, overwhelmed, but you're going to be much less likely to spiral or snap at someone or shut down or do something you regret. In other words, you can feel the feeling without letting it run your life. So, what does it look like when you're struggling with regulating your emotions? Well, usually it feels like your emotions are happening to you. You might get a tight chest or a racing heart. Breathing becomes shallow. You might have nausea or trembling or heat in your face or that jittery, I just can't settle down feeling. Or you might have the complete opposite: numbness, heaviness, brain fog, disconnection. Mentally, it can feel like you just can't think clearly, you can't focus, and you can't decide. And your thoughts will often go straight to extremes or absolutes. Things like, this is a total disaster, I can't do this, or this is never going to end. Sound familiar? But nothing is ever as absolute as what your panicking mind likes to believe it is. And the reality is that feelings are not facts. Behavior-wise, this stuff often shows up as reacting rather than responding. There's a big difference between the two. So you might lash out, argue, or become defensive. Maybe you over-explain or over-apologize or people-please or say yes because you feel unsafe saying no. Or you might avoid, escape, procrastinate, drink, snack, scroll, work, clean, anything to stop the feeling. Or maybe you're someone who tends to freeze and do nothing, even though you might desperately want to. And then afterwards, whatever your response or your reaction is, you wind up feeling shame, embarrassment, regret, and that awful sense of, why did I do that? Or what's wrong with me? And that second hit after can be the part that really gnaws away at your mental well-being over time. So I want you to bear this in mind as we continue talking today. Emotional regulation isn't just a mindset thing, it's a nervous system thing. It's not just think positive or reframe it or talk yourself out of it, right? Sometimes that helps. But when you're overwhelmed, your nervous system is often in charge, and so your body is already acting like there's a threat, and it has zero interest in what your rational, logical mind might have to say on the matter. If you're prone to a harsh inner critic, it often tends to kick in around this time as well. I talked about that in last week's episode, and I'll leave it linked in the description. So your first job here is actually stabilizing, creating enough safety in your system to think, to choose, and to act with intention. That's why that really simple pause, breathe, what, why tool that I gave you earlier matters so much. It's something I talk about a lot in this show, and it's not a pithy little slogan to remember. It's a really practical, effective way to interrupt the emotional hijack and to bring you, your logical, rational mind, back online. And that's absolutely essential if you want better mental health in the long run. So, now let's talk about why regulating your emotions matters. And it's because this stuff isn't just about feeling better, it's about how you live your life when life is a lot, which it is a lot. When you can regulate your emotions, that's when you're going to be more able to think clearly, to communicate better and set boundaries and stick to them and make choices that you don't regret later. When you can't regulate, everything gets harder, stress feels louder, anxiety ramps up faster, and even little things can tip you right over the edge because your system is already close to full capacity. Overwhelm changes how your brain and body work. When you're overwhelmed, your nervous system treats life like everything's an emergency, and your brain prioritizes survival. Not logic, not long-term thinking, not nuance, survival. Your brain says, uh-oh, highway to the danger zone. That's when you get fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or shutdown. In those states, you're not being dramatic or just overreacting for no reason. Your brain and body is doing exactly what it thinks it has to do to keep you safe. The problem is that the strategies your nervous system chooses when it's in survival mode are not always helpful in modern life. Let's be honest, snapping at your partner doesn't solve the pressure you're under. Avoiding a tough conversation doesn't make the problem disappear. People-pleasing might keep the peace for 5 minutes, but it often costs you your self-respect, and it makes things worse longer term. And shutting down might protect you from feeling too much, but it can also disconnect you from the support you actually need. Here's the part that most people miss. Poor emotional regulation doesn't just create one bad moment, it creates a cycle. You get overwhelmed, you react, and then you deal with the consequences. Conflict, guilt, missed work, isolation, spiraling thoughts, or just that lingering emotional hangover. Then you become more stressed, more anxious, more on edge, which makes you more likely to tip into overwhelm again. It's a really vicious cycle, and that's how you can end up feeling like you're always too much or like you're just not coping, not because you're actually incapable, but because you're trapped in a loop where your system never truly gets a chance to reset or to rest. Now, the fact is this: you cannot think your way out of emotional overload. Not at first. Later, yes, reflection and thinking definitely matter, and they're really important skills for better mental health. But in the moment, if your brain and body is in survival mode, the quickest path back to choice is to stabilize your system first. That's why emotional regulation is such a critical mental health skill. It reduces the intensity of your stress response, lowers the frequency of emotional spirals, and it helps you to recover faster when you get knocked around by life. And it also protects your relationships, because when you're overwhelmed, you don't just feel it, it's like you leak it. Your tone changes, your patience drops, you interpret things more negatively. You become more reactive or more withdrawn. And so the people around you respond to that, which can create even more stress. Emotional regulation is how you change that. It's how you create a pause between feeling and doing, so you can respond in a way that aligns with who you actually want to be. Overwhelm shrinks your choices, emotional regulation gives them back. Because the goal here isn't to never feel overwhelmed again. Good luck with making that happen. The goal is to know what to do when you are overwhelmed, to have a process that helps you to move from reacting to responding more thoughtfully. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about right after this quick break. And welcome back. Now let's get into the how-to part of this episode and let's talk about how to manage your emotions. Okay, so 2 quick things. First, everything I'm about to share is in the transcript at ltamh.com/episodes, and it's also linked in the description below, so you don't have to remember it all. And second, we are not aiming for never feel overwhelmed ever again, right? Like I said before, we're aiming for when I feel overwhelmed, I know what to do next. So we're going to work across all 5 survival states: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and shutdown. Because overwhelm doesn't show up the same way for everyone. And sometimes you're not just one thing, right? Sometimes you're fight on the outside and freeze on the inside. So I'm keeping it practical and flexible regardless of how overwhelm shows up for you. We'll start with quick tools that you can use in the moment and then build from there. So the first one is check your state. When you're overwhelmed, the fastest way to get relief isn't always just calm down. In fact, it's never just calm down. It's asking yourself, what state am I in right now? Because fight needs something very different to flight, and freeze needs something different to fawn. So ask yourself quickly, am I revved up and reactive, or am I shutting down? So if you're in fight mode, your priority is lowering the heat before you speak, because your mouth will write checks your calmer self definitely does not want to have to cash. If you're in flight, your priority is slowing that sense of urgency, because panic makes everything feel like it absolutely positively must be solved right now or you'll explode. If you're in freeze, your priority is tiny movement and grounding, because your system has hit the brakes. If you're in fawn, your priority is pausing before you agree, because safety feels like pleasing others. And if you're in shutdown, your priority is gentle reconnection, because you've gone offline, and forcing yourself will usually just make things worse. This one step alone and knowing exactly what you need and giving it to yourself can change everything, because it stops you using the wrong tool for the wrong state. Okay, next, stabilize yourself. This is where the pause, breathe, what, why technique I mentioned earlier comes in, but now I'm going to upgrade it by one question, so it becomes like a full circle back to choice. Pause to notice the emotional hijack, breathe slowly for at least 15 seconds because we're signaling safety to your body, name what you're feeling in plain language, and identify why in one short sentence, just the trigger. And then here's the upgrade. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? The question is not, what should I do forever? Right? It's not, how do I fix my life? Just, what do I need in this moment to prevent escalation? Is it some space, water, a slower pace, a clearer boundary, reassurance, a clear next step? This is where control your emotions becomes real. It's not controlling the feeling, it's controlling your next move. Okay, so I can almost hear some of you thinking, Jeremy, that sounds lovely, but when I'm overwhelmed, I just react. And yep, same. Hi. That's why we're building a process that you can practice anytime, so that your brain has half a chance of finding calm when you're not. So the more you do this when you are calm, the easier it's going to be when you're not so calm. And so that brings us to the things you can practice over the next week or two so that all of this starts to stick. First, identify 2 nervous system resets you can repeat. And that means having one to downshift and one to discharge. Let me explain. Downshift is about telling your body that you're safe. Discharge is about letting the stress energy move through you so that it doesn't sit in you all day. So downshift could be slow breathing, a warm shower, a cup of tea with both hands on the mug, or lying down with your feet up on the wall for 5 minutes, right? Simple things that indicate safety. Discharge could be taking a brisk walk, shaking out your arms and legs, or stretching, doing a few squats, or even cleaning the kitchen like you mean it. Anything that helps your body release the charge. And before any of you roll your eyes at that last one about the kitchen, yes, it sounds ridiculous. But you know what? Your nervous system doesn't care whether or not it's cool or it sounds ridiculous. It just cares what works. And that works. It's a great way to channel that energy. Okay, next, practice conscious repair, which means what you do after you've reacted so that you don't spiral into shame and make things 1,000 times worse. So if you snapped at someone or shut down or avoided or people pleased and then find yourself resenting it, the repair here isn't to attack yourself, it's accountability plus kindness. Now that can sound like, I got overwhelmed and I reacted. I'm sorry, that's not how I want to handle things. I'm going to take 10 minutes and come back more steady. Or you could say, I shut down before. I wasn't trying to punish you. My system hit overload. Doing this stuff, repair, matters because it keeps one difficult moment from turning into a much bigger story about who you are. And it keeps your relationships from becoming collateral damage. All right, now let's move into longer-term changes, the big picture pieces that will build your resilience and capacity so that overwhelm doesn't affect you quite as often or quite as hard. First, shrink the overload load. If you're sleep deprived or overstimulated or constantly rushing around, not getting enough rest, always on, always reachable, always surrounded and consuming noise, your system is going to overload faster. So capacity building is where you protect your peace in the background. That means tightening your boundaries, reducing unnecessary demands, building more space into your week for yourself, and treating rest and time to recharge like a requirement instead of a reward. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And if your life is set up to keep you overwhelmed, your emotions will keep acting like it's an emergency. Okay, next, emotional tolerance training. And that means learning to stay with discomfort without instantly fixing it, avoiding it, or panicking. This is where regulation becomes a skill you practice, not something that you either have or you don't. Just practice noticing discomfort in small doses and staying present in it and reminding yourself, I can feel discomfort and still be okay. That's the opposite of emotional shutdown and the opposite of emotional spiraling. It's steadiness. It's building the emotional muscle that says, this is tough and I can handle tough. So, those are the tips. Now, if you notice that you lean heavily towards one particular state or another, like, anxiety and urgency, anger and intensity, or people pleasing, shutdown, whatever, I do have other episodes that dig into those more specifically. I'm not going to list them all here. I'll link a few in the episode description, and you'll find it in the transcript as well, so that you can then follow the thread that's going to fit you best. And I'm also planning an upcoming episode focused specifically on emotional shutdown and functional freeze, because I know a lot of people deal with that. So make sure you're following or subscribed, and I'll bring that to you soon. And you can find the transcript at ltamh.com/episodes or in the description. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode. Emotional regulation isn't about forcing yourself to be calm or shutting down your feelings. It's about steadying your nervous system enough to get your choices back so you can respond with intention even when you feel overwhelmed. So, what's one thing you can do differently this week to help you regulate your emotions? Let me know in the comments on Spotify or YouTube, and let's talk about it. I love hearing your perspectives. Because when you boil it all down, the goal isn't to control what you feel, it's to control what you do next so that your emotions don't run your life. Each week I like to finish up by sharing a quote about the topic, and I encourage you to take a few moments to really reflect on it and consider what it means to you. This week's quote is by an unknown author, and it is, "Learning how to regulate your emotions is freedom." Let me repeat that. Learning how to regulate your emotions is freedom. All right, that's it for this week. Support my show by giving it a like and sharing it with someone who'll find it helpful, and join my Patreon for early ad-free episodes and extras. It's linked below. Thank you very much for joining me today. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time. Join me next week to talk about family estrangement. Plus, check out my episode on overthinking and thought spirals next. It's linked in the description. And follow or subscribe to never miss an episode. Let's Talk About Mental Health is an independent program. Discover more at ltamh.com.